Welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Norman, your host. Well, we've been away for about 10 days, but we're bringing you a show on this Friday, which is a couple of weeks before Memorial Day. We've been lucky enough to have a good run in the lacrosse tournament, and we'll stick with lacrosse for a while until we finally lose our last game. But in the meantime, we want to bring you what I think is a really interesting show on sailing as we move towards the Memorial Day holiday. And obviously, we've got some racing locally, and it picks up in June, and we'll bring you all that information. Up on this show, we're going to get a chance to talk to the Chicago Yacht Club's chairman of the Chicago to Mac race. Starts July 12th. It's the 115th running. We're going to talk to Winn Soldani on a brand new software program that is supposed to be one of the best in the world, being used by some of the great races. And it'll hopefully enhance the user experience. And Winn's going to talk a little bit about not only for the skippers and the folks that are registering for the race, but those watching online and being able to get a chance. It's supposed to be quite a program. He'll explain it to us, and I think it'll be pretty cool. We then get a chance to travel back to Bayview. We've been on Inside since January with Wally Cross and System Sailing, and Wally's going to get a chance to talk to us a little bit about the system as it actually pertains to the boat. And we're going to spend some time on a J35 owned by Mike Soldani, and Mike's going to give a chance to see how the system works for the average guy, and I think that's something you'll find interesting. It's a sort of a hands-on experience talking about some stuff that, again, if you're an experienced racer, you probably know most of this. But for the rest of us, it's, I think, a really good opportunity to talk, and I think that's something that Wally will bring to us, and I think that Mike will learn from the experience. We hope you enjoy that. That said, one of the first things we want to talk about briefly is the Mills race coming up June 7th, 8th, and 9th. We are going to be registered for it this afternoon. We're taking down Reliance, our boat, and we're going to be racing with some friends, a bunch of us that are 70, and it should be a great experience. And we're looking forward to the Mills race, and we're going to go down early, and it's going to be an extravaganza. We'll start bringing you some sort of inside stories here in the next couple of weeks before the race. And all that goes with that. We're hopefully also going to be able to broadcast live during the race. We're going to see if the drone will work, and if all goes well, it'll be a great experience. If you're not aware, we're going to do a number of races this year. We're going to certainly do the Mills race. We're also going to do the Queen's Cup. Eric Weinsman has been nice enough to allow us to come aboard Unusual Suspects coming from Milwaukee to South Haven, and that'll be June 28th. That'll be a pretty interesting race. And then we're going to hook up with our old friend up in Duluth, Keith Stauber. Keith's going to give us a chance to be part of the Bayfield race. And we're not exactly sure where that's going to take us, but it's going to be fun. We thought, again, we'd get off the dock and look at what racing's like. And we're looking at this, I mean, we're really clear. We're looking at this through the eyes of a very inexperienced racer. I've sailed my whole life, but it'll be interesting. We may find out we're not crazy about racing, and we may find out it's something we want to do. But the idea is to give you an insight. If you want to race, this is what it might look like. And we're going to be on a slow boat like mine. We're going to be on a Great Lakes 52, screaming across Lake Michigan, and then certainly get a chance on a J35 up in Duluth. And hopefully we'll be a participant for July 20th in the Bayview's 100th race, which is interesting because you've got two 100-year-old races this year. You certainly have got the Mills race that we're going to participate in, and the Bayview race is also 100 years old. So it'll be a fun summer, and I think it'll be pretty terrific. The other thing we wanted to mention is the Hallie Hansen One Design race coming up at Bayview on May 31st, June 1st and 2nd. All the folks from Sailing World magazine will be in town, and it'll be quite a race. I think there's about 103 participants as I looked on Yacht Scoring a couple of days ago. David Reed and Sarah Renz from Sailing World will be in town. We'll spend some time with them. We interviewed them a couple of weeks ago for the story, and we wanted to make sure that we dropped this in. There's still, I think, a chance to be involved in registration. That's something you'll have to check. But we're looking for a big weekend to kick the summer off, and that's something that we think will be terrific. And we'll be back in a second. Welcome back. We're talking with Winn Soldani, who is the chairman of this year's 2024 and then next year's 2025 Chicago Yacht Club Yacht Race to Mackinac. We're going to talk to him about a new sort of a nautical cloud management system and all that goes on. The 115th race will be coming up here in about 2 months and a day, if I'm not mistaken. And that's on your countdown clock on the front of the website. So, Winn, I appreciate you taking a couple of seconds. And I guess the first question is, you become chairman of a race this big. You've been a member there since '98. And what kind of job is being the chairman of the race?
Well, I've got an incredible number of volunteers working with me. So it's an incredible amount of volunteer effort, certainly on the chair's part, but it's also just incredibly humbling watching the amount of time that our volunteers put in. Both the Mackinac committee that does all the preparation, all of the, the system stuff that we're going to talk about in a second, maybe the race committee preparation that goes on, the ratings evaluations that we have to do. If I have to say a word for it, it's humbling though. It really is, and I mean that in sort of the proudest sense of the word. It's an honor, and I'm humbled to be asked to do this.
It's a big job. Does it become almost at this point in the season, almost your full-time job?
Yeah, it takes up a lot of time. I'm not going to say that it because I have a full-time job, right? So
Right.
I can't do two of them, but certainly it fills up an awful lot of time as the logistics become busier and busier and busier. Plus, what happens is people get their boats in the water, and now they start paying attention to, oh, I got to finish my registration. I need to ask a question about my safety at sea. I've got to check my equipment and stuff. So you just start to get like a lot more noise, definitely.
Okay. The big news is that May 1st, you rolled out what is now called the Nautical Cloud. And I'm just to let you explain it. And I think it's sort of an enhancement of race management for those trying to be involved in the program, and maybe explain what it is.
Yeah, so the Chicago Mac was one of the first offshore races, if not the first offshore race, to develop an online sort of entry system, and it sort of morphed into something into yacht scoring a little bit. Actually, over time, we had to move away from yacht scoring a couple of years ago, not of our own choice, and started creating other custom software. After a couple of years of doing that, we realized that we were like spending as much time creating custom software, maybe even more creating custom software than we were managing the race. And we just, as a committee, realized that that wasn't healthy for the race. If we're spending that much time worried about, getting a serial number into the system correctly, or some minutia of the system, rather than worrying about adding value for the racers, we're worried about the wrong stuff. So we put a little subcommittee together that looked at the other offshore races around the world and what they're using, and we found Nautical Cloud. Nautical Cloud is used by Rourke. So that's Fastnet rates, Caribbean 600. It's used by Sydney Hobart. It's used by Newport Bermuda. So it's used by lots of major offshore races around the world, and I think that's the company that the Chicago Mac race wants to be in. So it's it's Windows based, it's Microsoft based versus custom software. It'll look and feel familiar to people in the way that they enter their information. It's stable, unlike the custom software that we have been in since 1998. Has been a little unstable from time to time, and like it does all the things we need to do to run a major regatta like this, because now we're in partnership with those other great races using this system. I think that people are going to see a much easier entry process, a much easier data maintenance process, a much better tracking process. It's actually got a great integration with YB as a part of it. And one of my goals for this race was to make it simpler. And I hope by going to this software system that we had to make it a little more complex on May 1st. Not ideal. In the long run, it's simpler for people, so more people can participate now.
So if I'm looking and sitting down to register for the race, it's just going to be an easier experience for the entrance.
Yeah, and it's a cleaner experience that's more familiar to you from other forms you filled out in other places, right? With all the bugs trapped and all that fun kind of stuff, so that we don't have people just sort of banging their head against the wall that they can't figure out some twist or turn of a custom system. This looks like stuff that you've dealt with other places, which it feels good.
Okay, the tracking system will still be yellow brick. Am I correct?
Yep, it's YB is still the tracking system. And what we're doing though is we're going to tap into some of the power that has already been built in by Fastnet and Caribbean 600 and so forth and so on. They've built power into the system to do more with the YB. So it's integrated inside of the Nautical Cloud system that we've installed here. So we're gonna again, I think that fans are going to have a better time following the race. Like for instance, you can do split times now. So let's say I want to say, hey, I was faster than Boat A from Chicago to Point Betsy, but they were faster for me from Point Betsy to Manitous. So you do cool stuff like that. And we'll have a lot of information. Please do stay in touch with our website, cycracemackinac.com. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook, because we got a lot of teaching to do, which is really fun, right? Some really, really cool stuff here with the new system for racers to be able to enjoy the race, and for fans and followers to be able to enjoy the race.
Well, I think, from a user standpoint, but more from a fan standpoint, during that, Friday night to Sunday afternoon, whatever it might be, it takes the guys to get up there. And certainly the the baby race, same kinds of things. You kind of watch the map and to see where everybody is. And if you had like you had a couple of years ago where you get Eagle way out in front, it got to be even much more fun race to watch because you realize they'd caught an early breeze and nobody else did because everything else had died below them. So being able to see that's kind of fun to watch. So it'll be a great enhancement for the race, certainly.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, I think you're talking about last year where Eagle sort of shot out of the gate, but then Whitehawk caught him and mowed him down in the straights, like passed him between the bridge and the finish line. And like, boys, if that's not the story of Chicago Mac, I don't know what the story of Chicago Mac is. Like, victory in tears at the Straits of Mackinac. I got to get that on a t-shirt, maybe.
Well, one of the post conversations I had with one of the racers was that I actually went back to my computer and my phone to see how many times I checked your race, and then conservatively that also with the baby race. And I think for the Chicago race, I think I looked in a matter of about 18 to 20 hours, like 33 times or something, just you're sitting on the couch and you check it, right? You see where they are.
Yeah.
Now you're being able to break down those time frames in sort of areas and in logistics, and that'll be fun to watch.
From a race organizer point of view, this is a year-round undertaking, right? I mean, you'll probably hear us say this if you're here at the race. That planning for the next race starts the day after the previous race. But it's interesting from the spectator point of view. It's about a week, and then it's about 2.5 days of racing, of actual following that kind of stuff. So like getting as much as we can out of those couple of days and out of that week, to show people what an amazing event this is, that it's a bucket list event, that you got to do it, that we're having a great time, that it's the crown jewel of the Chicago Yacht Club. That's a challenge for us. So when you talk about the system, another positive for the system is that it allows us to focus on that. Right. And it helps us to accomplish that kind of stuff, because it's not a lot of time to talk about let's call it 260 boats this year. Maybe it's 300-400 boats next year. That's not a lot of time to talk about all that. So anything that we can do to make more out of it, we're trying to figure out how to do as a committee and as a club.
The next weekend, July 20th, obviously is running of the Bayview Mac race.
Yeah.
Does that 100th give you, because they're way over their normal allotment, because obviously everybody wants to do a bucket list sail in this particular regatta. Does that give you guys a few more opportunities to find boats early on because they're going to make the sail all the way across?
So I mean, absolutely. Marginally, there's going to be people entering the Super Mac, right? We're running a Super Mac before that, so we might pick up a few from that in our race. But the other important thing is we're getting a lot of people to do an offshore race, right? If you can go do that race and you haven't done it before, then you're capable of doing Chicago Mac also probably too. So if we can get more people doing offshore racing, seeing how beautiful it is, seeing how wonderful it is, that's an opportunity for the Chicago Yacht Club. And we're having our 150th anniversary as a club next year. And so we're actually going to put on a Super Mac, only happens once every 25 years, that starts in Port Huron and ends here in Chicago. Hasn't happened since 2000. So that's going to happen next year. Then we're going to have the CYC race to Mackinac. Then after that, the Chicago Yacht Club is going to be hosting the ORC North Americans in August also. So it's an opportunity you talk about someone in the Bayview race, they've done an offshore race, they can do that Super Mac if they want to push it. Or they can just come down and do the Chicago Mac and then go home. Or they can, come back here and do the RCNAs. But we're getting more people participating in the sport. And that is like job number one that I've given the MAC committee is growth. How do we get more people to get into sailboat racing, more boats and more individuals to do it, right? So you will see that we've visited a whole bunch of yacht clubs around the Great Lakes. I presented to Storm Trisel a week ago about the race and doing the race and bringing boats. We have plans to visit a number of East Coast and Southern yacht clubs to see if we can get people to come up here. We're reaching out to fleets around the Great Lakes. Like we're working very, very hard to build off really, like, as we said, Bayview and getting that number of entrants in Bayview. Let's make both races. Let's make racing the Great Lakes. Let's make sailboat racing like bigger than it is today. We've got only a few races have the capability to do that and the resources to do that. And, I talked about this being a humbling job. In that way, it's a humbling job because we've got as a committee the power to do that.
I think internationally and nationally, I don't think there's any question the elite of sailing know what this race is, know what the Great Lakes are about. It's that in between that, that entry play guy like me who, casually races in beer league and that kind of stuff, but you got to start to step up with it. Sometimes it's cost that it makes it a little more difficult or time. but the numbers are certainly coming, and it seems like it's headed in the right direction.
Yeah, look, we're real sensitive to time and to cost in particular. So this year, for the first time, any first-time boat, someone new to the Chicago Yacht Club race to Mackinac, our minimum length is 26 feet. We gave them 26 feet of their entry fee back as a refund. So they got like, we're putting our money where our mouth is. We want to grow this race. If you come do this race this year, and I don't know what we're doing next year yet. This year, you get part of your entry fee back, so you can go defray some of that cost.
Wow.
We're really literally putting our money where our mouth is.
Yeah.
It's a race about growing the sport.
That's amazing.
I don't know of any other race that's done that, right?
No, I can't think of any. None at all. No, I think that's pretty terrific.
Thanks.
Just a question in my head. You get this for 2 years. You obviously had conversations with other chairmen of the race. Have they told you the second year is easier than the first?
Well, it depends on the chairman. So some chairman, if it like for the 100th race in 2008, that was Greg Marecki's first year. So
Right.
we had a harder run the first year with 423 boats than he did the second year, right? Or you get bad weather one year and not bad weather another year. So it depends a little bit. I have to say, I'm not sure that I would use the word harder for 1 year versus another year. They're different.
Okay.
Right? They're different. Each one has its own personality, having been on the committee for a little while. I think the logistics become a little more natural to you in year two, but it's kind of like when you're exercising and working out, or you said you play golf a little bit. When you start getting good at it, right, then you've got to do better at it also.
Right.
Right. When you lift weight now, when I'm lifting weight and I start being able to lift weight now, I need to make my weights heavier. So again, the ask next year is I would love, the committee would love, the club would love to see 400 plus boats on the line celebrating this club's 150th anniversary next year. And so year two, I'm not going to worry so much about the logistics part. I don't think. We'll see. I'm going to worry more about how, and I'm already doing it, right? Like how committee, I had a conversation last night with the MAC committee. How do we grow? How do we grow? How do we grow? How do we bring more people to do this race? How do we bring more people to do the sport? So it's a matter of focus, to answer your question, not easier or harder.
Right. Are you racing this year?
No, I'm not. I broke my hand actually in the winter, so I don't feel safe on a racing sailboat right now.
So maybe the first a sigh of relief will be up on the island when somebody's got a cold drink in your hand.
Yeah, the first sigh of relief, because I was vice chair last year, the first sigh of relief for me then at least was when you're on stage of the award ceremony. And if I use the word humbling, for that moment, I'll use the word rewarding. When you've got 2,000-3,000 people out there in the party, shaking people's hands, people are thanking you for a job well done, hopefully, right? Right. That's sort of Tuesday afternoon after that party is when it's sort of
right. And it's also be noted that you don't get picked as chairman, out of the crowd at the back of the bar. It's a long process. Like it's just like being a part of the flag. You start at the sort of the bottom, so to speak, and you do all the jobs. So you have some familiarity with the process. So I get that a lot.
Yep. I've been on the committee on and off since 2008. So it's it helps to have that kind of depth of knowledge about the race, certainly.
Well, Winn, I hope our paths cross this summer. I really appreciate you taking the time out. And for those folks who are registering or thinking about registering for the race, when is deadline?
June 1st is the entry deadline.
Okay. Have a great what's left of May, and hopefully we'll see you sometime this summer. Thank you very much.
Great. Take care. Thanks.
We're obviously talking with Wally Cross. We're here at Bayview again, Wally, and we're going to be on the boat finally. We're going to be on top of the boat, not just talking from a yard. So explain what we're doing today.
Yeah, what we're doing today, Greg, is the first time I meet a customer at their boat. I want to start the process of system sailing by measuring and tuning the rig, going through that whole setup so that they understand how that's done, and then start with putting numbers and references down on the deck for all the moving parts. We want to mark the jib leads on both the Genoa, the jib, the backstay, the vang, the halyards. Everything gets a reference mark so that he can keep track, or she can keep track of all the different settings when they go sailing for different wind speeds. So the first thing I'll do is introduce myself to the owner, and then provide that owner with a set of wet notes and some markings. Okay, now we're on J35 today. Explain who's the owner, because he's obviously on board. Maybe explain the boat real quick. Yeah, his name is Mike Galdoni. He used to own as a matter of fact, he still owns a J29. This is a J35. And this class has really exploded in the Detroit area. Quite frankly, to a big effort of a guy named Dean Fitzpatrick. I think there's 17, 18 boats now. The North Americans will be here in September at North Star. So this has become a really competitive one design class. So one design is my passion, and I think it's the best racing around. So in order to be really, really good at one design, you need to know and understand the settings on your boat for the different wind speeds. So we're going to start that process today with Mike on his boat. Michael, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So what I'd like to do today, with your permission, is start this process for system sailing on your boat. So the first thing I'm going to do is give you a set of wet notes. Okay, and the reason for the wet notes is that you can keep track of everything we're doing today, so you understand the process, but also, most important, write down the different settings for your sails and different wind speeds, so you can develop a blueprint on how to sail your boat. And that's the goal, so that you can just give this information to your crew, and you can kind of develop it as you sail all the time. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do, and these are some markings for this. Hang on to that, because we're going to mark the lines with that type of insignia cloth. So the first thing we're going to do, Michael, is set the rig up. And what we want to start with is just making sure your rake, or the tilt of the mast, is in the proper position. So in order to do that, I need your jib iron. Is the blue in your jib iron?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we take your jib iron, and what we'll do is we set the jib iron so that, Mike, if you could just hold this right here. No, if you could hold this over here. So we make a mark at the top of the black band, and what I'll do with much more time is I'll use a fish scale, and I'll put it on the shackle just to pull this at a particular tension, and then take that same tension to make another mark on the headstand.
Well, did you call that a fish scale?
This is a fish scale.
As in you weigh a fish?
Weigh a fish. Yeah.
Okay.
But I want to, if I pull 35 pounds there, I also want to pull 35 pounds there.
Right.
So those two marks have a good reference.
So this is not some scientific instrument. It's a fish scale.
It's a fish scale.
Okay.
Then the next step is we'll take a measurement from that mark down to the deck to come up with what I call an arc number, arc measurement. Okay? In his particular case, it's at 90 inches, which is a good setting. And then the next step is to center the mast. Can you let the main heart go?
Mike, how long have you had the boat, and what's the name?
We had it for 3 weeks, and we're going to call it Centurion.
Okay. And you have a J29, am I correct?
Yes, it is.
So you obviously like J-boats.
You know, they're honest boats that sail to their rating. They're not too tweaky, but they're a good boat to bring friends and family out on the race. So we enjoy that.
And there's also a huge fleet now in the lake, which is really something I think is important.
Oh, like Wally was saying earlier, the J35 class has exploded. They're constantly building new boats or working on old boats and making them new again. So it's been really exciting to see that.
Okay.
So the next step, Greg, is that we take the main halyard on center line, and then what I do is I'll typically just get in this seat right here, sit in it, use my weight, make a mark on the main halyard, and then make a corresponding mark on each shroud, this shroud and that shroud. And once I make that mark, and I'm convinced they're consistent side to side, again, we'll take the tape, the same tape that we used at the headstay, and measure from the deck to that mark, and adjust these shrouds here so that this measurement is the same side to side.
Can I assume that you have to use your weight only on both sides, being equal weight?
Exactly.
Because if we did you and I, it would be completely unequal weight.
Yeah, we'd have to really adjust the rig.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fair.
So once we do that, then we're going to tension these shrouds to a number that seems to work on this boat.
Okay.
And in this case, it's roughly 40 on this loose gauge scale. And so we'll take this loose gauge and put it just like that. Now, this is a little small for this particular boat here, but on the proper loose gauge scale would read 40.
Okay.
Okay. So once we get the tension the same on both shrouds, then the next step is to just hand tighten these two shrouds. These are called diagonal shrouds. This is called a vertical shroud because it goes all the way to the top. These two are diagonal shrouds. We'll just hand tighten these so that when looking up the mast, it is straight. It's not done until you go sailing. And the goal is now to go sailing and breeze 8 to 10 knots, 12 maximum. We call that a base setting. And adjust these two shrouds so the mast is straight.
How are those affected in bigger winds?
How is it affected in bigger winds?
If you set them at 12, give or take 12 knots.
Yeah. So
And
in
it's-
this particular boat, once we get these two shrouds set so the mast is straight, when I look up the mainsail track in 8 to 12 knots, you won't have to touch them again, nor the shroud here. What you touch on this boat is the headstay.
Okay.
As the wind picks up, you shorten the headstay. As the wind lightens up, you lengthen the headstay.
Okay.
And then in the very light breeze, you let these off a couple turns. That's it.
Okay.
Now, once these are all set, you're happy with your setting at base, you take a caliber like this, preferably a digital one, and then you measure the distance between the two studs in your turnbuckle and write this information down on your wet nose. And that would be your base setting. It's our goal always to leave the dock and come back to the dock at a base setting so that you're not already influenced on what your setting is when you go on the race course.
So consistency is what you're looking
Consistency.
When should we adjust the forestay? When before we head out, when we look at our wind numbers, or once we're on the port?
Now, always leave and come back at a base setting, and we'll determine what that is yet. I'm not exactly sure what it is on this boat, but we'll always come back and leave at a base setting so that once you're on the race course, you get out there an hour early, you sail against another boat, you kind of determine, do we need more power or less power? You adjust your headstay for that race. And the good news about this class is you can make adjustments up until the 4-minute or the warning signal. All right, the next step, once we've got the rig set here, is to start putting our markings down so that we can remember where the sails are set. So I brought some of these vinyl sticky numbers, as you can see. So I'd like to start first with the jib hire. Mike, where's your jib hire at?
It's on the starboard side. Spinner on starboard.
For the novices, and I got a question.
Yeah.
Rake means what? And rake is affected how?
Rake is the tilt of the mast fore and aft. More rake means it's tilting more towards the transom. Less rake means the top of the mast is leaning more towards the bow. So in light air, we let the mast come back to achieve two goals. One, it actually flattens the mainsail a bit, so in light air, it's not a big travel around the sail. And second, it provides a little bit more feel or helm to the tiller, to the helmsman, which allows the boat to track upwind a little bit nicer.
We're explaining this for the guys like me that are trying to learn some of this stuff.
So these numbers will go right here. Mike, did you have a chance to write this down?
I did.
With acetone?
Yes.
We'll go ahead and stick these down. Ideally, you want to put these down on a really warm, hot day, and then they'll bake onto the deck really well. So this may not be the best.
So erasable magic marker would not be what you want to use.
No, sir. You want the markings to look really nice, professional, and then you want to record all the settings for different wind speeds. Hopefully, I've had these for a while.
Well, there's 10 numbers on there, and it looks like they're about an inch apart. Is that fair?
That is fair.
You're actually going to have that much adjustment? Up to 10 inches?
You could.
Okay.
Not just in one particular sail, but Mike has a couple different sails.
Okay.
He has a boat number 1 Genoa, then he has a number 3. Sometimes the number 3 isn't as tall as the number 1, so you need a large enough scale so you can accommodate both sails. But in light air, from light air to heavy air, which is number 1, it could change up to 6 inches.
Okay. And the thing we talk about, and the thing we have talked about, is this is one of 12 to 15 things you're doing. It's not just, you don't do just one thing to make it work, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. anything that moves on this boat, from the vang to the halyards to the jib car to the backstay to the main sheet to the genoa sheet to the spinnaker sheet to the twing, needs to be referenced.
Well, and I asked that question because the through hull that we talked about in the last show, this 1/8 of an inch through hull at the front, you were almost losing your mind that the guy wasn't going to fix it on one boat, and he fixed it on the other. And I kind of asked a dumb question: you're going to try and tell me 1/4 inch through hull is going to matter? And again, on my submarine it doesn't matter, but on a J35 it matters a lot.
Yeah, and I was happy to see that that particular customer did fare everything in. He took the time to do it, and he did a very impressive job. So it does matter, because in your mind you want to know that your boat is at least as good, if not better, than the rest. You never want to think that, man, I've got an average boat, so that means my results can be average.
Okay.
You need to think that you deserve to win, not hope to win. You can have the talent, but talent doesn't always relate to confidence. Confidence is what takes you to the next level.
Right.
So once you've got the talent, how do you get the confidence? You get the confidence by setting your boat up, doing all the stuff proper first, but then going out there and doing a better job practicing, being prepared than the next person. 80% of the result of the race is done before the race starts. And
Right.
And it's how you get prepared. You hear stories of basketball players talk about, having so much confidence that the rim looks twice as big as a normal rim. It's in the baseball. Baseball players talk about the ball just traveling slower. They're so confident in how they hit. Same thing in sailing. Once you've got that confidence, you absolutely know in your mind you deserve to have a good race. So Greg, here's our numbers.
Yep.
Mike, thanks for allowing me to put this on. Ideally, you want to put this on a nice warm day. Let it bake. Don't wash the boat for a week. And once it's on for a very long time. But let's just assume now that we're out sailing, and we will go sailing in the future, but let's make the assumption we're going sailing. What I would do next is I take my markers, and what I do is, this is just orange insignia cloth, and I put little slits every 1/2 inch, and I'll just rip one of these sections off, take the back off, and that to Mike. And if we were sailing along with the Genoa blowing about 8 knots, maybe I'd put a marking just about halfway, a little less than halfway, like so.
Okay, explain the marking. That's really the point, Wally.
So the marking is, again, this is the insignia cloth, and it's really bright, it stands out, and right now, if we like this setting for the Genoa, 8 knots of true, the pit person would, with their wet notes, would write down 5, number 5 for a headsail setting, because when he rounds the top mark, goes downwind, Genoa comes down. As they're approaching the leeward mark, you would like to have the jib set at the same setting if it's the same wind speed. So that's the reference there for the jib. We'll do the same for the main. We'll do the same for the Genoa track, jib track. Like I said, backstay will get marked. Backstay will get marked with on a batten, like so, and then with different colored tapes.
Okay.
And the same on the vang. The vang will get different colored marks.
Okay, so here's my question.
Yep.
This is a consistent formula, much like ORC as compared to PHRF. We've had that conversation 100 times. We always talk about great sailors having feel. Can you have feel? Can you be a conner and have a feel for the boat using your system?
It helps the feel because it confirms the feel.
Okay.
What's key about all the numbers is that you put the numbers on one side of the brain, you use the other side of the brain for the feel, and you bring the two together so they make sense.
Okay.
It's a confirmation. And if you just trust the feel, sometimes you're not necessarily confident that that feel is giving you the right results. This gives you the right results because you've seen it. Now you can be more consistent with it, and then you can trust your feel quicker.
And then the last question is, does numbers change with wind consistency? Meaning, there's 20 knots and 10 knots. Are there differences in the numbers?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, not only difference in the wind speed numbers, they're going to be different sail setting numbers. In 10, 20 knots, this orange mark will be closer to 10.
Okay.
In 2 knots, it might be closer to 2.
Because it can be flatter.
Yeah, you just need more tension.
Okay.
You need to create more entry angle, roundness in the sails.
It gives guys like us the chance to repeat to get back to that fast setting without guessing.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to do that. You want to have these meetings afterwards and talk with your team, compare wet notes, and say, hey, look, do we like our settings? Should we try a different setting next time? And then when we go sailing, Greg, what we'll do is we'll take pictures of the sails so we can relate the shape of the sails to the settings and start really getting down to the number side of sailing.
Mike, is this worth it to you?
Yes,
Why?
because for us, I'm not Wally Cross. I can't set up a boat like Wally can, but I can come out, look at the numbers, and say, at 10 knots of breeze last week we had it at 5.
Okay.
So I'm going to go back to 5 again, and we'll get close to that right setting, and so we can repeat it over and over again instead of every time reinventing the wheel, going out every time trying to reinvent the wheel. What do we do? We don't know what we did last time. What are we going to do this time? And it just helps us to be consistent.
It's also cheaper than a $400 driver for your golf league on Thursday.
Oh, it makes me feel better.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's, you used to buy a whole golf set for $400. Now you buy a driver or a putter for the same amount of money.
That would be a cheap one, unfortunately.
So Wally, on the wet notes, what I said, like date, and then whatever when we're observing.
Yeah, and what is important on the notes is everybody's got them, and then you just combine all that information at your meeting at the end, and then you put it in whatever form you want to put it in to keep track of it. Either Google Docs, something that has sustainability that you can share online with people, and you want to develop your own blueprint for this book. It doesn't have to be anything like the way I do it or anyone else does it. It has to do in the way you want to do it and how you want to communicate with your crew so that it has life when the crew comes and goes.
All this is driven back though to your speedometer, isn't it? If you make an adjustment, the boat goes faster. You want to make sure you have that note, right?
Well, you want to have that note not only in speed, but you want to have that note in reference to other boats. Because when you're sailing, Greg, a lot of times you're sailing next to another boat. You may not be going faster, but you might be getting closer to them, or sailing higher, or sailing lower. So your reference to other boats is higher, lower, slower, faster.
All right, let me translate that. Is that you're saying that sailing more efficiently beats speed?
Copy.
Okay, that's news to I think a lot of us.
Copy.
Is that fair, Mike?
Yes.
And that term is called VMG, velocity made good.
Okay.
When you're sailing around buoys, you're trying to always maximize your VMG, your velocity made good, which is a combination of height or depth, fore or aft speed.
So, guy sailing at night, when he pulls his flashlight out, and I'm on the boat with him, and I'm making fun of him because he's looking at his sails at night with his flashlight, I should stop making fun of him.
Well, you should encourage him.
Okay.
You should ask him, what are you looking at?
All right, fair. But that's a really interesting point. Efficiency beats the heck out of speed because it's not just a horizontal. It's a vertical and a horizontal sport. You got to go as much fast sideways as you do forward.
It's so true. A lot of times, it's more important to sail up or down relative than fore and aft. You've got the ability to adjust your height relative to another boat. Extremely powerful tool.
Okay. Well, listen, I appreciate both Mike taking the time and Wally. I appreciate your time for explaining what I think is an interesting tip that you might want to pay attention to. So we'll check out the next one next couple of weeks, and appreciate your time.
Thank you, Greg.
Just want to take the time to thank Wally and Mike for spending some time on his J35 at Bayview. And certainly, hopefully you learned something from Winn Soldani. Make sure you check out the Holly Hansen Bayview's One Design race, and all that information is coming up on May 31st. It's going to be a great weekend, and we look forward to kicking off the race season with some really good footage and interviews from that event. That being the case, we will see you in a week. Have a great one, and let's hope fair wins.